Thank you, Amy. Okay, now I can start. Thank you, Amy, for kicking us off. And thanks to MAG and all of our partners in the Affordable Housing Collaborative. We thank you for being here today. This is our fourth webinar in a series. So if this is your first time joining us, we welcome you. These webinars were created to bring those working in affordable housing spaces together to share not just the challenges, but also navigate the solutions ahead of us. And a lot of where we continue to develop this is directly informed by you all on this call and in this work. Just to give you some insight, our previous webinars have focused on topics such as public-private partnerships, promising practices, funding sources, water, and transportation. We have learned deeply from case studies and each other during breakout sessions that have fostered discussions that in some cases have led to funding partnerships and project collaborations, which is always our ultimate success story. We have had elected leaders and experts in and outside of Arizona as keynote speakers and on this call today. Thank you all for being here. In our state, I know we acutely feel this housing pain, but we are also aware that we are not unique to the supply shortages and rent burdens people around the country and the world are facing. So we hope this past year's worth of education and insight from these webinars have been a guide to get us to the topics we are going to present today, where we will learn about the creative and important resources to help Arizona succeed with actionable solutions across diverse sectors of housing. Unfortunately, the housing crisis here has reached this tipping point where evictions are at an all-time high, and for every 2 people falling into homelessness in Maricopa County, only 1 can successfully find housing. But as people, we do seem to come together and are able to achieve great things when we are forced to and face our big problems head on. So this is our belief and what powers the work of not just the Arizona Community Foundation, but our presenters today, and I'm sure all of you in this space. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to a steadfast partner in our housing work, the Executive Director of LISC, Terry Benelli.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. LISC is Local Initiative Support Corporation. And we are a Department of the Treasury Community Development Financial Institution, which is a mouthful, but basically we are a lender. LISC footprint across the United States is in 38 urban locations or cities, and our rural team is involved in over 2,000 counties across the United States. So you can see that we have a lot of experience to bring to the table from all over the United States. I happen to have the privilege of overseeing our Arizona operations, where we have been a part of the community and investing for 32 years. Our investments are not only in housing, but economic development, childcare, healthy community projects like federally qualified healthcare centers, emergency food programs, and financial stability programs, all in communities that are all underserved. But today we're here to talk about housing and housing that folks can afford. In this arena, LISC is a lender, a grant maker, a syndicator of tax credits, and importantly, a capacity builder for the nonprofit affordable housing sector. I'm happy to introduce you to my colleague, Michael Scributanis, who's here today to talk about our success nationally and how that relates to the Arizona affordable housing sector. Michael has over 25 years experience in housing and public service. He served in the White House. He served as the Deputy Director of Economic Development and Housing for the New York Governor's Office, as well as held many leadership roles in nonprofit housing finance entities. But currently, he's LISC Senior Vice President of Housing. He leads our work on systemic and policy issues, and he helps assemble vital housing capital and oversees the products and services that our local office brings to the Arizona market. Michael, take it away.
Thank you, Terry. Let me put my screen on. Pardon me. Just a moment, folks. Oh, sorry. Here we go. My apologies. Here we go. Thank you very much, everybody. So good afternoon, everybody. Sorry for the glitch. My name is Michael Scributanis, and I'm delighted to be here with my my colleague Terry Benelli. It's it's important to note that Terry is very well respected. I'm delighted to be here today. Terry is one of our more seasoned EDs, and it's a real pleasure to work with her. And she really set me up doing this whole event with 300 people. So I hope I don't disappoint her. So again, just to repeat, Local Initiative Support Corporation has been around since 1979. We are a lender and an investor, and we help create solutions for local communities. And my focus in my whole career and the basis of what LISC was founded on was affordable housing, and it's a real privilege to have the opportunity to work here. I just want to also recognize, Terry's leadership goes, not only as a seasoned veteran of the LISC office, but she also serves in the Federal Reserve of San Francisco board as well, serves on other boards and commissions in the state of Arizona, and she's a real asset to your community. So thank you, Terry. So the National Housing Team is small, but our primary purpose is to support the 38 local offices and the rural team, and we do a variety of functions. I come fully equipped at my late stage in my career in affordable housing development and finance. So, we support offices and development of transactions, and we have a particular interest in making sure that we help to expand and preserve homeownership opportunities for households of color. Very interested in expanding a home repair program across the country, as well as addressing a unique and under-discussed topic of heirs property. We have a problem in this country that's not really discussed, which is we have households that died intestate. That is, they don't properly properly transfer their assets, and homeowners are left with the belief that they're homeowners, but in fact they're not. And we lose a lot of home ownership units every year to that problem. So my team is small, but we do our best to service 38 offices and developing strategies. So, here's the issue. I did a little collection of slides. I've been at this for quite some time, and it wasn't so long ago when you would communicate and talk to the political class, and they would glaze over when you would talk about affordable housing. And I think we all now have accustomed to the news cycles and to it's now in the air and the water. Affordable housing is a genuine national crisis. In fact, as Sarah noted, it's actually a crisis that's impacting, many countries in Western Europe. There's an article in the New York Times this weekend about how Ireland is facing a housing crisis, Great Britain, France. So the problem is enormous, and it took us over 40 years of neglect to get here. The lack of housing impacts social mobility, family formation, economic development, and it exacerbates racial segregation and income disparities. It's a market failure and a failure of public policy. And it's fair to say, having been in public service much of my career, that government at every level has failed to properly respond. And it's not as if we have had this is a case of first impression. We've had grave housing crises before, the Great Depression, after the war. And in those events, right, we created, after the Depression, the self-amortizing mortgage, the 30-year mortgage product today that we all think was, kind of created out of thin air, was a product of government intervention. We created public housing. We created many tools to address the housing crisis. I think we could all agree that there were, in many instances, there were cases of unintended consequences, but it still was a robust response to how we address affordable housing. We need government to intervene, particularly at the federal level. So our housing shortage estimates nationally, right, are almost hard to digest. Fannie Mae a few years ago, had a totality of a shortage of 3.8 million. The National Association of Realtors, as you can see here, almost between 5.5 and 7 million units. The National Low Income Housing has the gravest prediction of all, which shows a shortage of 7.3 million units. And those are just affordable. Those other two categories are inclusive of both market and affordable. However you slice it, it's a problem of scarcity. Terry and I, in preparation for this conversation, talked a little bit about, we have profound and deep disparities in the labor market, but without production and without units, we can't have a labor market to properly respond because, rents and prices will only increase without some meaningful increase to supply. So getting back to the core issue, how can LISC, or what do we do about, LISC's strategy? We believe at LISC, right, that markets that we address problems at the local level. The first letter of LISC is local. That's what the L stands for. So how do we address the strategy? How do we address these problems? So let's get into a little bit what's happening in Arizona. As Sarah laid out, you have your own Department of Housing predicts that, or shows that there's about 270,000 units short. That appears to be just in the affordable space. We know you're like many other states, right? There's a grave shortage of affordable housing, particularly at the very low incomes. The truth is, this slide, many of you seen before and understand the data. I could probably scratch out Arizona and put in almost 49 other states and have the data look very similar. So I suspect, this data better than I do. It's a major problem. What are some strategies that we can get to it? But before I talk about tips and strategies and tactics, I just want to walk through the thesis a little bit further, right? Our problem is grave, right? So consequently, what's our strategy? Like, when we have a profound problem at every level, at almost every typology, maybe with the exception of luxury housing, right? We have to employ our best methods and our best strategies. And I came up with, I thought this is moderately clever on my part, that our strategy has to be everything, right? We have to be creative, dynamic, and try strategies, and don't be fearful about making attempts and perhaps not being the most efficient or failure. Otherwise, we won't get anywhere. We need to everything. We've got to really not only work on supply but demand. So one quick point I want to make, and this is, if you allow me an editorial moment here. I think many of the viewers on today's call will know basically the fundamental federal housing programs. Just to share with folks, Section 8 is a demand side benefit, right, that supplies, helps to support the rent for low-income families. Currently, Section 8 is really only capturing about 25% of the households that are eligible. Where, it could be a powerful tool to meet our affordable housing crisis, but it lacks appropriations. We need more money in that program. There are some other programs here identified: block grants, CDBG, home, 515, public housing. Those are all appropriated dollars, unlike the low-income housing tax credit, which is a tax expenditure, which means that every year it's a renewal found in the tax code and not appropriated. I do want to note to folks, though, that the biggest housing program, our most robust housing program, is not even identified here. And it dwarfs all of these other programs, and in fact, dwarfs the budget of HUD itself. And that program is the mortgage interest tax deduction, which I suspect that many of us enjoy. We take mortgage deductions from our federal tax liability. And it's a regressive program, and it's a program that actually benefits very wealthy homeowners as opposed to poor homeowners. So the point that I'm making is, we subsidize housing in various ways. We just may not be it's pretty clear to me that we're subsidizing the wrong form of housing. And the biggest one of all, coming in at about $70 billion annually on the tax expenditure side, is the mortgage interest tax deduction for homeowners. So just a little bit about the Arizona climate. I'm in no means an expert. I'm dialing in to this call from upstate New York. But it's pretty clear, right, that one way we can begin to move the needle on affordable housing in all of our communities, including Arizona, is how do we allow for ease of permitting? it appears from the data that I've looked at that in many markets, like many markets across the country, you have restrictive zoning. It makes it very difficult to build and produce housing. And that's a topic I think some of the speakers will discuss today. So that's certainly a tactic and a strategy, that should be on the table, particularly for public policymakers. In my past life, I practiced land use law, and I just recently resigned after a 12-year term on my local planning board. So I'm very aware of the challenges of making changes to local land use law and planning, understanding that it can be it's a politically treacherous area, but for us to address this housing crisis, we have to speak to it, and we have to speak to it honestly. Again, this is some basic data, which I will leave with the team at the close of this. I think most of the speakers know this material better than I do, right? We have just in Tucson alone that looks like there's a limitation about where you can build multifamily housing. It appears that the Phoenix's own general plan just has some gray limitations about how we produce housing. And we know that rents, because of the scarcity, rents are far exceed people's low wages to cover those costs. And as I suspect the listeners know, that the first dollars of almost every household, particularly low-income households, are always rent. Those are the greediest dollars of all. So I want to talk a little bit about tactics, and this is a kind of a blended slide. I just want to talk through, in maneuvering around the space about Arizona, I could see that your governor has identified housing as a priority. It's the second on her splash page. It's the second topic that she's identified, housing and social services. And you have a state housing agency, and you just recently, created your own state low-income housing tax credit program. I congratulate and applaud the state of Arizona for doing that. What we need to talk about as a possible tactic and strategy is we can create all the units we'd like, but we have to also make sure that units aren't falling out the backside, that we're not losing units to market transfers. And one issue just to talk about, we can explore this further offline. However, we'd like to see if you could talk to Terry. I with our policy team, wrote a piece on qualified contracts last year, which is a weird provision in the tax credit code. I suspect that folks know that the low-income housing tax credit is the primary driver of production on multifamily rental housing. But what we don't know, what people may know less about is owners can sell those properties if they apply for what's known as a qualified contract. Because of a fluke in the statute, that is the federal statute, they can be released from their income restrictions under certain circumstances. We're losing about 10,000 units a year nationally to the qualified contract. So one area for discussion with your housing finance agency is, have you put the proper means and measures in to prevent the loss of units on a preservation basis on your tax credit portfolio? You could build all you want, but if we're losing them to market rate forces, then it's pretty inefficient. And as you know, building affordable housing is very expensive. So, I want to just pin this topic for further discussion. Maybe, perhaps we could, discuss more later with Terry or others about the qualified contract provisions relative to the state of Arizona. We could talk about that later. One other strategy that we've been working on at LISC is, church-led housing developments. Originally sponsored in our Bay Area office in our San Francisco team, we've been working with lots of churches there that, have excess land, excess property, convents, parsonages, excess land attached to the church itself, or, place of worship. Churches have served and they're also located in communities, often, in our core cities. So how can we use these assets, work with churches to stabilize their finances to address kind of changing demographics? So, we've been successful in our Bay Area office. Our New York City offices has some success in this area, as well as San Antonio. Again, this is these are resources that LISC through Terry's office and, with some of my assistants, we could support some of your communities that have large plots of land that are underdeveloped that they'd be open on a mission basis to create affordable housing. It's been, it's one small way to kind of address this crisis. And lastly, right, again, one area that I'm very committed to is our small building stock. Tax credits are a great tool, but given the cost structure and the complexity of tax credit programs, it's very expensive and very complex. You need scale. So projects are increasingly have to be very large in order to make the numbers work. But that's not where we only have about 3 million units nationally of tax credit units. Where do people live? They live in smaller properties all across the country. Small properties make up the bulk of our affordable housing stock, and it's largely unregulated. So I'm spearheading small building initiatives in a number of our offices, including our Richmond office, Richmond, Virginia, and our Kansas City office, which is to create a fund to help finance, recapitalize, restructure the financing of smaller properties, 4 to 40 units here, restructure them, and to create long-term affordability. Given the complexity and the cost of capital these days, I think LISC is well situated and well positioned to raise capital that is competitive to compete with conventional lenders, but provide it and then structure financing so we can get long-term affordability out of these properties. Again, we need production at every level, and this is one gap in our ecosystem. Attached to that, though, small buildings have always been an entryway, a path to kind of real estate investors. And we have coupled the small building initiative with HDTI, Housing Development Training Institute. So we just recently closed an HDTI Training Institute with emerging developers, particularly developers of color, in our Newark office. I'm about to launch one in our Richmond office. And here we are, we're training what typically are tradespeople who want to, have some skills in building trades or property management, and supply them with the tools and skills necessary to build, construct, and operate housing, particularly affordable housing. It's a path to wealth, and it's obviously meeting a very critical gap. So coupling a housing development training institute with a small building financing program, we think is a great strategy across all our markets, because small properties are a gap across the whole ecosystem. There's very few states, with the exception maybe of New York, that I could think of that has any small building financing available. So this is certainly a ripe topic that I'd like to, discuss, and hopefully some of the other speakers may be interested in discussing this further. But our Housing Development Training Institute is a very deep and rich curriculum, going through all the fundamentals of training, starting with site identification, how do you select contractors, how do you do property management, how do you assemble financing. It's comprehensive. It's a very deep curriculum that can be sized and scaled accordingly, but going to be several weeks of in-person and webinars. And we've had a number of very successful graduates across the country have gone on to really produce some really great projects. So, this is entitled Tactics and Tips and Strategies to Increase Affordable Housing. This is just a smattering of things that we do. The key to our work is to tailor it to the local market and the local condition, and address the concerns that are generated at the community level. There are many other things that LISC has in terms of its toolkits and toolbox, including, home repair and, very supportive housing. But these are the topics that were, kind of identified by me as being of interest to this cohort. And I look forward to taking your questions as this panel goes on. I wanted to show you just some of the work we do. It's a deep, broad, it's a 600-person company with a lot of skills and a lot of assets. And I just want to make myself available through Terry to you to discuss any of these topics further. So with that, I want to take down my slides and turn this over to Sarah.
Thank you, Michael. I recently just saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I loved it. And I'm happy to have a conversation about how wonderful that movie is. But I have been saying that for the past year as well, of there's not one solution to this. So I appreciate you bringing that. We did have a question I wanted to follow up with you on, specific to some work that Vitalyst is working on and interested in of co-location efforts. Do you have any examples? Terry put some information in the chat, but if there's anything you want to add to anything that LISC is working on, or how you perceive that would be helpful.
I see there's a number of questions on co-location.
Maybe community health centers we can start with also, if you'd like. That's easiest.
Oh, let me see. Where did the questions go?
And Michael, I put the example of our DC project that has the Federal Qualified Healthcare Center, the affordable housing attached to it, and also the workforce development element to it. And by the way, it's transit oriented as well. But
you hit all the boxes. Yeah, Terry, you may know more about that project. Again, we have 38 offices. I'm not fully aware of all the examples of our work. What I can say is what LISC is ideally suited for these complicated projects that we finance projects that are with kind of but for LISC they wouldn't get done. We have a tolerance and an underwriting capacity to see these kinds of projects. Again, what Terry just described is unlikely to be financed by a conventional lender. It's too complex. So again, I could follow up with whoever sends the question with more details on that particular issue.
Yeah,
well, I see.
We used not only low-income housing tax credits, but new markets tax credits to throw into that deal to make it pencil. And we also used a financing mechanism that we get allocations from the CDFI fund for our Healthy Futures Fund. I don't know that I could speak intelligently to it, but we do have tools that we can bring from our national sponsors to local projects. We did use New Markets on a Mountain Park Healthcare Center, but that was just for the healthcare center here locally.
I would add, right, that what Terry described, combining new market tax credits and low-income housing tax credits, these transactions are very attractive and appealing, but are not for the faint of heart. They're complex, right? They take years to close, and you need complex, pretty serious legal services. That as much as I like fun, complex projects, right? They take years. They consume a lot of resources, and so if you're really looking for production scale and putting units up, keeping, as they say, keep it simple, stupid, to the extent you can, right? It's complex. Well, I see one other point. I just want to make an editorial comment about home ownership. LISC is not we are not a residential lender. We are not however, we very active in supporting home ownership opportunities, particularly households of color, with an expanding home repair program. After 2008, particularly in COVID times, right? Many community development offices across the country have really weakened and have limited capacity, but there's a real demand on the part of the local politics to kind of help support communities with low-cost access to capital to do home repairs. These are communities that are largely excluded from conventional credit markets. So we have low-cost capital. We have a program we launched in Detroit, a program in Memphis, about to launch a program in Cincinnati and Cleveland. I'm working with those offices to stand up very low-cost capital for homeowners with lower credit scores to kind of do critical repairs, life safety improvements. And, you know, we have a select list of contractors. And, you know, for a 10-year term, low cost money to kind of do this work that ordinarily they wouldn't be able to access capital. That served a very interesting purpose. Not only is it it's stabilizing home ownership, but it allows us to kind of help with the financial capacity of a family. We make sure that they're banked and they put their cash in a credible place, that they have credit scores. We pull title and we find out whether or not do they have actual title to the property. If they don't have title to the property, in fact, if there's an entanglement of title, which I described earlier as heirs property, we send them the legal services. So it's the pathway into making corrections and the stabilizing this portfolio, because we've been losing these homes through investment because they're distressed, have tax arrearages, or they're just beyond the capacity for homeowners to build. So that's my pitch on home ownership. And, you know, I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to stand up home repair.
Thanks, Michael. We've got some good comments and questions in the chat. I think maybe have time to, at least at this point, before we do Q&A wrap up at the end. Elias said, maximizing density is good. What about maximizing home ownership, statutes on smaller lots? And then also the addressing converting obsolete office buildings to affordable housing. I guess maybe specific to you, do you have any specific thoughts in this space? Is LISC looking at this? And are there any local or federal grants or tax abatements from Joel? Thanks, Joel.
I just, you know, speaking about obsolete office buildings, right? It's after COVID, right? We have increasing vacancy rates in lots of our core cities, right? So we have what's happening. We have a challenge portfolio in many places, and there's a move, particularly in our large central business districts, to convert and rezone these areas for housing. Oftentimes converting office buildings into housing is challenging because you need light and air, you need access to windows. That's kind of basic habitability standards. What happens to the interior core? So there's design issues that make it very difficult, but I think we're seeing some transformation, some movement towards rezoning our central business districts and allowing for offices, I think, are allowing for housing. I think that momentum will only increase as the vacancy rate on commercial properties increases and we start to experience real distress at the commercial property level. I suspect our municipalities are already probably getting requests for reductions in tax assessments because their diminishing revenues are really devalued these buildings. So it is both, you know, we don't want to waste a good crisis, a good challenge, and here's an opportunity to convert these properties. I think with they won't be easy because they don't lay out for housing all the time, but we think there's great opportunities to convert these properties into some form of housing in particular markets. So yeah, LISC is exploring from time to time those opportunities that are presented to us, and we certainly encourage it on the part of municipalities.
Thank you. We'll have questions and more time for Michael at the end. I appreciate everyone's feedback and interest in this. We'll move it now to the second to third portion of our call, which is going to be our panel. And I'd like to pull two more things. The faith leaders work, part of this collaborative is working on bringing faith leaders into this conversation on housing. I see some of them on the call today. And also Terry put information in the chat if you'd like to sign up for the technical assistance capacity building, the HDTI, that has also come organically out of these conversations and collaboratives. And we're hoping to bring that online for affordable nonprofit or otherwise developments to take place and get capacity building and technical assistance on that front. But now we'll move towards the panel discussion. So as Michael alluded to, the crisis we're facing today is a culmination of a variety of factors ranging from funding to land, supply chain issues, workforce, regulatory and policy issues. So it makes sense that there's not going to be one or three, major solutions that will fix this, that's long and deep and widespread. So what we'll hear from today is going to be a number of different solutions that are being deployed to counteract these, negative factors we're facing, and the different approaches we can use to build differently, quicker, and more easily. So I'd like to introduce you to our featured panel. We have Jamie Podratz, who's the Communications Manager for the Arizona Housing Coalition. From the League of Cities and Towns, we have Tom Belshe, the Executive Director, and Nancy Davidson, General Counsel. And then Darlene Newsom, who is the former CEO of UMOM and consultant now with Vitalyst Foundation. So thank you all for participating in this panel. I'll have kind of a two questions in one. The first one would be, could you each give a brief intro to your organization's work in the housing space and the resources that you're developing to help ease the speed and ease of building or preserving affordable housing? And I'll just go in that same order again. Jamie, if you would kick us off, that'd be great.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here and to hear from Michael and the other experts on this call. I am joining you from the Arizona Housing Coalition, which is a membership organization, a nonprofit 501c3 based in Phoenix, but serving across the state of Arizona. Our vision is for all Arizonans to have access to safe and affordable housing. And our membership is made up of the dedicated affordable housing developers, the tireless homeless service providers across the state that are meeting the needs for folks experiencing homelessness, housing instability, and really meeting that need of building more supply of the affordable housing. So we at the coalition, our biggest strength is our membership, the shared voice, the convening of our many members from across the state. And to that end, we have developed a series of resources designed to help our members and non-member agencies really address the challenges of meeting the needs of folks experiencing homelessness and needing to meet that supply need. One of the recent pieces we've been working on is an affordability housing toolkit for municipalities. First iteration in 2019 is a response to specific resources that are unique to Arizona. With the unique challenges that our state is facing, some of the resources that are available on the national scale just simply don't apply here in Arizona. Of course, the limitations beget creativity. And so really speaking to creating a resource that speaks to the unique challenges of development in Arizona and also the really unique and creative responses to meeting the needs for affordable housing. So in addition to the toolkit and a lot of resources we have posted on our website, we also gather folks together as a membership organization. We have the ability to convene and to bring folks together. Our next big thing is our annual housing conference, which will be held in February, bringing together developers, nonprofits, all the folks working along that continuum of housing and homelessness, and really trying to bring folks together to share resources, share expertise, make connections and introductions, and really try to fill a void in terms of connectivity for folks working across the state. So I'm happy to be joining you from the Arizona Housing Coalition and eager to share and learn more with you today.
Thanks, Jamie. And then Nancy and Tom, if you guys want to go next.
Oh, your microphone, Tom.
Gotta love Zoom.
My apologies. I am going to be the curmudgeon, and I'm going to let Nancy show the nice side of our organization. It is my pleasure to be here. I want to talk about, Jamie put it well, we have to be creative here. I'm going to talk about the reason we have to be creative. There are my colleagues, municipal leagues exist in every state except for Hawaii. Municipal leagues are representatives of the cities and towns at the state legislature and also at the federal level. And so we see a lot of the work being done at the state legislature. And when I talk with them about our affordable housing issues, they're shocked, for example, that we don't have tax increment finance. We're the only state that doesn't have that. And many of the affordable housing projects that are built in other states are done using tax increment finance. So that's one thing tying behind our backs. The other thing that I find out is there's a dearth of actual housing data at the state level. Okay. For example, the number that was mentioned earlier, 270,000 units, the methodology that arrived at that number is pretty sketchy. Okay. I'll be honest with the audience. And so there needs to be a lot of work done on data and definitions. What do we consider to be an affordable, project, and who are we targeting with that? What is the demographic, and what is the definition of that demographic? Are there areas that where that demographic exists that we could target when we're talking about that issue? We don't have inclusionary zoning. That's another thing that my colleagues are shocked that we don't have inclusionary zoning and the ability to ask developers that are working to provide for affordable units. We have a proliferation of short-term rentals in this state, and places like Sedona and other places, the affordable units during the 2008-2009 time period were all bought up, and 20% of Sedona's housing is short-term rentals. It's a huge problem. Private investors is another problem. We love the idea of co-location. That is one thing that we've been looking into, and love the idea of exploring that further. Folks from Vitalyst have talked to me about that, and we love to take a look at how that might work, and getting our other partners, the school districts, the faith organizations, and others that local government properties. We love that idea, looking into that. And also, one of the things that may be interesting to people on the phone is Arizona is number 48 for average size of lots. In other words, we have one of the smallest lot size averages in the United States. And so, while we want to look at issues and problems, I don't think that that's what we're saying here today, is that we put it all on planning and zoning. I think that there's a lot of other areas that we need to include. That should not be the sole focus of housing conversations. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to bring home. And also, that I think the most successful things that we've done outside of the legislative process. That's working directly with the developers. We had one of the most successful meetings that I've ever seen, just bringing in some developers and putting them on one side of the room, and putting some development services folks from cities and towns on the other side of the room, and having the developers say, what sucks about working with the cities is X. And we say, what sucks about working with the developers is X. And it's amazing how we were able to start working on some solutions right away. Oftentimes, because of the ideological differences between both sides, it's very, very difficult to get to good policy, because good policy requires compromise, which is something that there doesn't exist a lot of at the state legislature right now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy. Nancy can talk about all the positive things that we're doing, but I wanted to make sure that we understand, what cities and towns face also as far in Arizona, as far as trying to develop affordable housing.
So thank you for having me today. I'm Nancy, and I don't know if it's good news, but it's concrete steps I thought I would talk about. Last session, we were very, very proud. The first bill that was signed by the governor was a bill that we drafted and worked with Senator Peterson in drafting SB 1103. And the intent behind the bill at the time was, in Arizona, there's two types of cities. It's very similar in other states. There's general law cities and there's charter cities, where in essence, what it is a general law city can only act as specifically authorized or implied by statute, and then a charter city has greater authority. And there aren't very many charter cities in Arizona, but when it comes to a general law city, a lot of the challenges that we had in the land use context and building code type of context, where there were certain things under state law that said certain types of development approvals must be approved by the local governing body. So it had like shall be approved by, but a lot of those things were not necessarily things that council had, whether it's the expertise or the discretion to deny those approvals. So we were making applicants go through this whole process and a public hearing and so forth for things such as plat amendments or preliminary plats or final plats or just basic minor divisions of land or lot line adjustments. And so what we wanted to do with this bill is provide specific authority to general law cities to do certain things where they don't necessarily have to put it on the public hearing agenda, because it is more on the engineering side or so forth. So SB 1103, among the stuff that it did authorize cities to do was approve site plans and development plans administratively, land divisions, preliminary plats, final plats, design plans. We also included language about design plans based on objective standards. It allows for self-certification programs where engineers, architects, and so forth can go through either it's a training or some sort of certification process like the city of Phoenix does. And they can self-certify their plans that they comply with the local codes. There's certain types of projects that might not be eligible, such as products dealing with hazardous materials, but in general, and those programs have been shown to work. The one in Phoenix has been very successful. And so we had once the bill, which was the first bill signed by the governor, we put together a group of attorneys from big cities, small cities, rural, urban, and they did this on their own time, and we all kind of got together and we didn't reinvent the wheel. We tried to pick ordinances either from other states or cities in Arizona that have worked, and we tried to create model ordinances. There are 91 cities and towns in Arizona, but not every city has their own city attorney. A lot of them contract with outside counsel. So for a lot of cities, it is more complicated to amend codes if they don't necessarily have an attorney. So we thought by creating certain model ordinances that cities could use and modify as needed, that would be one tool. And our goal with this working group of attorneys is to be an ongoing thing. Like right now we have those 4 ordinances that were shared, but we keep thinking of ideas of what we could work on next. I think the next plan will be accessory dwelling units. We've looked possibly at parking standards and allowing for certain things. One of the model ordinances does include a provision that talks about the waiver of certain subdivision improvements. If, let's say, a subdivision isn't is smaller than a larger one, but that's kind of what we're doing, and it's going to be an ongoing process, and we hope to serve other tools such as checklists on how to improve design standards to make it more objective and so forth. So hopefully I didn't talk too much, but and we welcome ideas. If anyone has an idea, even if it's in another state, for our committee to consider and maybe try to create either a checklist or a model or training, we're open to ideas.
Thank you both, Nancy and Tom. And now to Darlene with a very, switching gears completely with a very new, innovative, creative model. Darlene, please tell us about your work.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for having me. Vitalyst Foundation has been very busy the last several years, and my background is, as Sarah mentioned, I was the former CEO at UMOM that has family shelters, but we were also a developer of affordable housing, mostly 9% deals, but most recently we're funded with a 4% deal. So I know a little bit about development, and I know that it's a journey and it's not a sprint, and it does take a long time, and it is complicated, like Michael mentioned in his presentation. But the Vitalyst Health Foundation actually has published several publications recently. The first one had to do with building attainable housing for school teachers. And we just most recently released the supplemental to that report. And basically what we were looking at is working with school districts in Arizona and the possibilities of building affordable housing, attainable housing, whatever the community might need. And so we had 7 different school districts. 5 were in Metro Phoenix and 2 were in rural districts. And we produced this toolkit, and every school district was a little bit different. And some of them looked at those smaller type communities and some at larger plots of land where they could build housing, multi-housing. And of the 7 projects, one of the projects has been funded with a 4% tax credit deal with the Isaac School District. They had closed a school several years ago, and in conjunction with UMOM as a developer, they're going to develop 96 units. 4% deal on that property. And so that will be open not only to the teachers, the support staff, but the surrounding community. And many of the other districts, Alhambra and the Mesa School District, the Washington School District, are looking at doing similar types of projects. Now in rural Arizona, we kind of went outside the box. And in Blue Ridge, they are looking at building container homes. 10 container homes on school property in conjunction with a child care center that's going to be developed. And so when we were talking to all the school districts and working on these projects, we're very interested in co-developing services, whether it's a healthcare center, workforce, child care center. We're all about co-development. And that also has taken us to another level in working with cities and talking about co-development. And talking about when you're building a library, why not build a senior center on top of that library? We're working with the Scottsdale right now with their Paiute Neighborhood Center and building 28 units of affordable housing above that. We're also in conversation with a YMCA who has additional property that they're interested in building affordable housing. And think about that. They already have an after-school program, a healthcare center, a dental clinic, and wouldn't that be great to co-locate with either affordable or attainable housing? And I'd like to broaden the conversation, not just to talk about affordable housing, but we have to remember our workforce and those who make between 60 and 120% of the average median income. They are being priced out of the market. And so when we're looking at and talking about housing, we're talking about the full range of not only the very low income, but those who also have been recently priced out of the market. We have several pieces of legislation we're working on. This year, we have a couple bills. One has to do with, we talked about land usage, land policy, and I have never seen more rules around land usage than working with the school districts. And so we have a couple bills that are going to be introduced this session around schools and being able to lease the property past 20 years and how they can use their available land. And we're in the preliminary stages, and I'll talk more about our involvement with churches later, but about Yes in God's Backyard bill to loosen up some of the zoning standards around building in conjunction with our faith-based communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene. I hope that gives you a lot of color and variety from the perspective of the people doing this work on this call today. And so my follow-up question to you all, again, going back to you, Jamie, or I could switch it up if you don't want to go first. Whoever wants to jump in can. How did you determine the need for these resources? You all are in coalition building and community and government, so you're talking to a different assortment of people. So how did you determine the need for the specific resources you're working on? And what lessons have you learned, whether, you know, it's unveiling now new or you're, you know, 6 months or a year into it? What lessons are you starting to learn from the toolkits you're putting out?
Sure. And I think, thank you for the question, Sarah. And it's fascinating. And what the other folks have talked about is, you know, what we've learned is just how quickly things change, and the appetite for talking about and addressing some of these issues over the past few years has grown and has increased the speed at which things are happening, and which is encouraging, of course, as we talk about the solution we need. And I think Michael said it well, we need the solutions, thinking about it in terms of yes to housing. We need it all. We need the workforce housing. We need the property developed on the school zones. We need it all. And that's what's really exciting about hearing about this Housing Development Training Institute. Some of these opportunities that are available for smaller scale development. And that is truly what we're learning, is how quickly things are changing and how the landscape in Arizona is moving at a pace we haven't seen before. So as we think about, what are we doing to continue to stay up to date? It is constant updating, making sure that we're keeping an ear on the ground in our local communities, maybe in a way that we haven't done as robustly in the past before, to see what are those unique partnerships that are developing, whether it's in the faith-based community, different community partners, really trying to take lessons from successes, challenges from among our membership. Having access to more than 350 organizational members, which represent thousands of folks working on the ground, really does end up being our biggest asset in terms of figuring out what's working, what are the challenges, what are the administrative or regulatory fixes that maybe don't cost an arm and a leg, that we can start to push the button on to move the needle and really make those little changes around permitting and the shot clock concept, really trying to think through what can be done as quickly as possible to remove some of those barriers that we're all dealing with on development.
Awesome. I think that's great. Listening is always key, and being nimble to adapt is great. Nancy, Tom, whoever is going to field that, you want to jump on in?
I think that we too agree that talking about timelines and permitting timelines, especially those kinds of things, that's something that we're very open to. It's something that last year there was a consensus bill, and a lot of what was in that bill has to do with timelines and how we shorten those. What we've heard from developers is that they need more certainty about how long things are going to take, and so that's something that we are fully on board with, and that we're trying to improve. And so and then also, just in a lot of these situations, it's communication. It's also finding in our individual cities, unfortunately, especially when it comes to, approvals, is there a particular logjam in that community? And, how do we deal with that? Is there a little fiefdom that's been set up that we need to deal with? Those things exist, and we recognize that they exist, but we would rather deal with those instead of, well, we caught one person chewing gum in class, so nobody gets recess. We would rather take a look at how do we deal with those situations individually, and how do we set up something where we're working together collaboratively instead of running to solve our problems at the legislative level. Let's learn to sit down in a room and work together. And we're trying to foster that. And we've been extremely enthusiastic about the response that we've received from the development community. And we're working, some of you may know Nico Howard and his group of developers. We're working with Nico, and our first meeting was very successful. And now we're going to set up a series of subcommittees to deal with these individual subjects, permitting timeframes, particular zoning that we might be able to live with, things that they think will really move the needle. Sometimes the stuff that we talk about is kind of done in a very shotgun blast manner instead of taking a look. That's why we love the idea of co-location, and we love the idea of really targeting the things that we need to target, coming up with good definitions for affordable, attainable. What do we mean by that? How much do we actually need of those things? There's a lot of data that needs to be put in, and we need to have the data drive our decision making, and not anecdotal stories that we hear all of the time. And so those are the things that we're trying to do, and we're learning a lot from the developers. And as always, we're surprised. We think they hate X, and what they really hate is Y. And so we're trying to find out what it is they actually hate, and if there's things that we can change immediately. And to what Jamie was saying, is what things can we push the button on right away? Nancy, is there anything that you would add to that?
Absolutely. I think the more we can streamline those processes for approvals, especially on things that are non-discretionary, like engineering standards, the quicker we can get these projects digging.
Mhm. You know, one of the things that I've done with the city of Phoenix is I've advocated for a streamlining process for affordable housing. You know, can we have a navigator? Can we carry this through? Because so many of the projects do get stalled in the bureaucracy and the permitting and the zoning process. I think that thinking outside the box, I think is really important on this because, you know, looking at city lots, talking to the city about, okay, how many lots do you have? You have 140 lots. And how can we get those lots, you know, out to the public? What can we do? Can we build affordable housing on them? Can we build duplexes? The whole idea of ADUs is something that fortunately many of the cities have picked up on and are starting to develop some policies and moving forward with building ADUs. But you know, I just saw something come up and I was going to talk about Not in My Backyard. It is very, very strong and very organized at this point. And it stalls a lot of the processes of moving forward as a developer with projects. And I don't think that we've done a very good job in our community of educating them about what is affordable housing. There still is a lot of myths out there around affordable housing that, you know, it's all Section 8 vouchers. It's all people who are not working. And, you know, because I've been in a lot of community battles, unfortunately, here in the Phoenix area and building housing, that it's just told me that we've not done a very good job on really that education piece on what we're looking at. Because once they see what we're building and they meet the residents and the building is open, then, you know, they have a whole different attitude about housing. But it is very strong. And that's why I think, you know, in the area of land usage, you know, I know that last year there was a developer that made, you know, 6 different offers on properties around the Phoenix area to build affordable housing, and each of their offers were turned down, and it's happening more and more. And that's why we're looking at the usage of extra school property. How about the community colleges that also have property that can be used? And, you know, hospitals are also very interested. They have land bank property and they're interested in building more affordable and workforce housing. But I think that continuing to work on all of these different areas, keeping the dialogue going and keeping the education in general, I think is going to be important to knock down some of the not in my backyard battles that are coming up and that we've read about recently in the paper.
Nat, if I could just to build on what Darlene just shared about how we communicate about affordable housing projects, one of the things that we would really like to tackle at the coalition, and I know a lot of you folks have done it really well, is to talk more specifically about who lives in these communities and who qualifies and what types of professional roles in our community are filled by folks who income qualify for some of these communities. That's going to be an initiative for us over the next few months, is really trying to connect with some of that storytelling side, because painting a picture of the communities that we served in an accurate way that is approachable and understandable and can start to shift those narratives.
I'd like to throw in just on that idea as well. There are other outside forces that are at work on this too. Just recently, I was at a community meeting in my neighborhood, and it was about, you probably read about it on the front page of the paper. Some condos were built on the Mesa side of the line, and right across the street is the town of Gilbert. There was most all of the units got bought up by a sober living home conglomerate, and caused all kinds of problems. And at the community meeting, the conclusion that the citizens came to is that we need to stop approving apartment complexes. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do as well, is say, hey, we're trying to get at the problem that was caused here. The apartment complexes are not the problem. Your kids that are going to college are living in them. This was a particular fraud. There's some changes that need to be made. Legislation is coming that's going to solve that problem. But this is the kinds of things that people in communities latch onto and use it as an excuse to not want to develop affordable, attainable, types of developments.
And I agree with the narrative. I'm a former public school teacher, so I know very well how little salary it is. But one of the things some cities are struggling with too is they're having trouble attracting public employees and housing them in their communities. So it's also, cities are also facing issues related to housing because the amount of money that maybe like a starting firefighter might make, or even just some volunteer firefighter, cities are dealing with the same type of issues that everyone is, so.
Thank you all
Sorry,
for those comments. Moving on to our final question, then we'll touch on some comments and questions I see in the chat. And I think some of this is covered, but any final thoughts you'd like to give on where is your organization like most excited about in and outside of what you've shared with us today, and what is the future that you're looking to build on this year, and in the spirit of kind of like the big tent mentality of how do we help bring the awareness to, for-profit developers, nonprofit developers, affordable developers. How can we continue to bring everyone into these conversations from a comment we got in the chat? Whoever wants to jump in.
All right, I'll jump in. What I'm most excited about is working with the developers on getting some of these tools that we don't have currently. I'm excited about trying to do something with tax increment finance. We're doing a very big investment in data at the League. And we hope to share that, again, getting information about where the need exists, and also in trying to increase that communication with the development community. And we feel very good about that. And if you have data, good definitions, and you have communication with the people that are making the investment, I think that'll lead to, more development, more the right type of development. There's another problem that we see is just investing in more rooftops is not just opening it up and say, we can build our way to affordability. I don't think that's the route we need to go either. They've tried to do that in California, and it's not yielding the results that they thought it would. So we think we need to be thoughtful about it. We need to have specific programs designed for specific groups. And so that's one of the things that I'm excited about working on.
I just want to mention that I'm very encouraged by the discussion around modules and looking at different ways, because we're not going to build ourselves out of this with tax credit projects and site bills. We have to look at our alternative bills. And I'm really excited for some, especially for some of the rural areas that have been very successful in this effort. In the teacherages area, Chino Valley was one of the first that put together 10 tiny homes for their teachers. And they're actually, all 10 are rented out, and it's working. And so I think looking at different ways to provide housing, and I know the Arizona Department of Housing has been working in building up its module licensing and approval rate, but there is different ways that housing can be used. And I'm encouraged by that, and especially working with some of the faith-based community that aren't necessarily interested in large complexes, but maybe 10 or 15 tiny homes on their property. And so to me, that's an encouraging step moving forward, is we're just not looking at larger bills. And Michael talked about this, that we need to look at some smaller communities, not just the large multi-complexes.
One thing I will share too, just from the Arizona Housing Coalition's perspective, and everybody probably on this call is well aware that the state LIHTC is set to sunset here, and that is a big priority for the coming legislative session. We know there's a lot of bills flying around, a lot of activity in the area. The state LIHTC renewal and expansion is a big priority, just to have one critical tool in the financing belt here for the development of affordable housing. So in the midst of all that's to come in the coming legislative session, I do encourage you to come to the Arizona Housing Coalition conference, or get signed up. If you're not already connected to our newsletter or our advocacy alerts or our policy committee, so that you can listen in and weigh in on some of these things as you experience them, I encourage you to connect with us. Our power is our collective voice. So truly asking to put your voice behind the passage of the state LIHTC this session, so we can get that through.
Thank you all. And I really appreciate all the comments and questions in the chat. And if we can't get to them all, please follow up with each of us or all of us after this. I'm going to summarize kind of a couple of points that I heard and maybe pull out some pieces in the chat, but I hope that you have all found value in this conversation. We've talked about more efficient use, better use of school land, of church land, of co-locations, increasing community advocacy from the simplest forms like these, where we can openly share dialogue and thoughts and experiences. The model ordinances that the League has provided us, which I think you all have links to that you can look at in depth. And then education and awareness, so that we're all coming at this from a place of, we know there's a problem, we know there are solutions. So how do we bridge those two divides from, all of us and all our different perspectives and alignment in this work? Now I only have 2 minutes until we need to move on, but a couple of the things I just wanted to point out from the chat are helping home builders solve the housing pipeline slowdown. How do you build tiny homes? So I guess that might go to infill and lot sizes. I don't know if Nancy or Tom, either of you want to take that specific question on?
I'm going to let Nancy answer that one.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's several cities, that either already allow tiny houses or are in the process of amending their code or considering their code. And I did see that little tiny house in Cottonwood, and I think I saw one in Flagstaff too. It was really cute. But essentially, I know a few years back, all the cities and towns in Arizona use the international, the ICC, the International Code Council, and they modify it based on whatever local conditions there are. And there was a period of time where the building codes didn't necessarily address tiny homes, but that's changed. I know there was like an appendix at one point, Appendix G, I think it was, that was adopted, and a lot of cities have been moving to adopt those types of regulations. But one of the myths, about zoning is that cities can just go and rezone everything to allow, but we can't interfere with people's property rights. If someone has a property that's a certain zoning, we can't just veto that property rights and change it to whatever zone we want. So even if we do have zoning ordinances that allow for tiny homes, they're only as useful as the property owners who are willing to rezone to that specific designation. And so I think a lot of the dialogue about the benefits of having varieties of housing and trying to counter that narrative that only certain people need affordable housing, all that is very difficult. And then in those cases, when cities are adopting ordinances to have more variety of housing, or where affordable housing developers are going to cities like the city of Surprise, then cities are facing referendums, and they've spent over a year and a half fighting this. The council voted unanimously in favor of this affordable housing project, and they've been embattled in this court cases. It's been sent up and down. There was oral arguments again yesterday, second time. And so, cities are going against the NIMBYs, and then we face referendums. And so those are just some of the challenges, but I think hopefully the narrative will start changing and people will start realizing that it is like my college, my kid who's going to be going to college, and it is everybody that is facing this affordable housing crisis, and there is value, and so that's just my 2 cents worth.
And I would like to add also that the league staff went over and met with Zenny Homes. I don't know how many of you are familiar with them, but they are a pod building company, and the homes are beautiful, and they can be built on a on a very small piece of land, and they make amazing use of space, and so those are things that we are trying to get more familiar with, and we're trying to educate our elected officials about those, and our staff. We are also, one of the other things that we're trying to do is take some of the burden off of elected officials and developers by having more things approved administratively. And so that's part of what we're looking at, is what part of the process can be done administratively, and what really needs to remain with elected officials or with boards that we have constituted. So again, I think that that's a very exciting prospect. Mesa, I believe, is going to build actually a large complex where they're going to stack these modules and build. And when they do the groundbreaking, we're invited to go out and take a look at that. And I think it's going to be a really nice addition. As I said, they're beautiful complexes. So.
Yeah, they're another example of just a unique creative product, and potentially could be great for ADUs as well, as we get that off the ground. Okay, I promise I'll kick it over. Michelle had a comment about rule, which I think is worthwhile to address. I think that the HDTI training cohort that we discussed earlier today here, in partnership with MAG, we also put on housing webinars specific to tribal areas that also encompasses a lot of rural work as well. So we'd be happy to share that information with you. We do want rural and tribal communities to be a part of these conversations and have a specialized focus there. ACF also has funds for affordable housing pre-development, low interest, no interest on some of our funds, and a lot of them go to affordable housing assistance for developers in rural areas who do need the technical expertise and a little extra help to get those projects off the ground. So thank you for bringing up that piece. But now I will kick it over to Darlene, Patricia Solis, and Amy St. Peter to tell us what comes next. There's more goodies that we have and more opportunities for different resources that we can deploy. So please, ladies, tell us what else is out there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thanks so much to all of our panelists. We have three comments to make, or 3 topics to cover in the what's next section. Darlene will be talking about a new grant from JP Morgan Chase. MAG has also recently received a grant from JP Morgan Chase, and Patricia will be leading a quick interactive discussion, and hopefully the beginning of more conversation to come with you about how we use this information moving forward. So at this point, maybe if we can switch it over to Patricia, if you'd want to start off with just a few questions. We have just 10 minutes left, so maybe 1-2 questions. It'd be great if folks can put your answers in the chat, and then that way we can hear from as many of you as possible. We will be saving the chat, and then please do reach out to us if you'd like to share any additional information. Patricia, would you want to go next? Maybe with just 1 or 2 questions?
Thank you. I'd be very happy to. I'm Patricia Solis at ASU, and this is just a very rich very rich knowledge exchange. So I really want to appreciate all the panelists and speakers. And it can also feel like everything everywhere all at once about the information overload from this session and the mini sessions that have been a wonderful part of the series. So what we would like to do next is help curate the set of materials and information and data so that they can be more easily accessed from a variety of audiences. And we're contemplating this in the type of a learner journey to sort of curate and point to all the different resources that we've been presented throughout the series. And so as part of that, we really like to hear from you, especially in terms of the kinds of information or data points that you might believe are critical when it comes to understanding this, what really absolutely must be included in this journey to point to what kinds of data is it that you look for when you're trying to understand what is going on when we're addressing housing affordability? I'll just give about 30 seconds and let you type in the chat some ideas for what it is that you look for. For example, are you looking for the number of housing units that need to be produced over a certain time period? Are you looking for percentages and data on equity? Are you looking for some of the costs? What is that one crucial piece of information that you must have?
Thanks, Patricia. And then as folks are thinking, Tom, I know that you had mentioned in your comments that there isn't enough data around the need for housing, that some of the methodology could be enhanced a bit. Do you have specific data points that you're looking for?
Yes, so we are partnering actually with data guru at MAG, Annabeth Bagley, and we're taking a look at a number of things. Actually, we are mapping out, okay, what developments have been approved and are not being built? What developments are in the pipeline, and you know, what are the issues that are holding those up? Where are the specific zip codes that we are looking at where rent is 50% or more of a person's income? Where are what specific positions are experiencing, like we mentioned teachers and we mentioned firefighters. We hear from cities all the time. The city of Page talked about the fact that they needed to hire 8 teachers for their high school, but couldn't find them housing. So we're trying to get specific data on that. This is one of those things that when we talk about it takes a long time. You can go out and do a snapshot in time, but the real benefit is when you take a look at the data over a number of years. And so that's what we're trying to do, is create a pipeline of all different types of, you know, what types of housing are going up. You know, what we hear all the time anecdotally about stuff that has not been approved. Okay, well, you know, where did that happen and why? And you know, taking a look at that to see if there's ways that we can improve the process to make it easier to move this. And so that's where data comes in, because it lets us know where the problems actually are. It's not, you know, a story or I have a feeling that this is an issue. The data backs up what we're saying. And so we're also working with a University of Arizona professor to take a look at actually what is the actual number, total market rate, attainable, affordable of the housing that we need, and trying to distinguish between those different types of housing. And so those are all data points that we're working on, and we would like to get information on.
Fantastic. So please feel free to continue to type in the chat on that one, and I'll just pose one more and briefly touch on it, and then we can move on to the last bit of news. As we're curating this, we really just want to make sure that it's a durable resource. And so we'd love to hear what you have to say about anticipating the future challenges and the ones that are relevant to our local context. So I guess the relevancy, right? So if we're envisioning a resource that really helps us see and understand the future of housing affordability, what kinds of information, challenges, or trends do you think we really should make sure is curated in the answer to that question in the materials, especially those relevant to the local context of Arizona? So I've heard a lot of that today, but just encourage you to add a couple of words there so that we are really directed to the things that are most important to you. So with that, Amy, thank you so much for the opportunity to ask these questions, and continue to be willing to take thoughts and ideas on how we could pull together all of the amazing materials from these webinars in a way that people can really find them and get what they're looking for.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Patricia. And for those, yes, please do keep on adding your comments to the chat. We'll also have a post-event survey. Also feel free to use that as an outlet for offering your ideas. And please do feel free to connect with us anytime we put our email addresses in the chat there. Darlene, would you like to talk about the new grant that Vitalyst just received from JPMorgan Chase?
Yes, thank you, Amy. We're very pleased that Vitalyst Health Foundation received a grant from the Chase Foundation to expand on the work we've already done, and also to expand our capacity to include churches and hospitals. So we're going to be able to take that toolkit, the supplemental report, and provide the technical assistance to school districts. We're going to be doing webinars. We're going to be doing presentations. In fact, we are presenting at the Arizona Housing Coalition on the toolkit. And we also have partnered with the Corporation for Supportive Housing, and we're going to be doing an academy with churches and hospitals all about developing affordable housing in the first part of April. And right now, we've already entertained, probably working with about 20 different churches, and that's going to grow, and who are interested in building all kinds of different affordable housing. And I've also had conversations with several hospitals. And of course, there's additional school districts that are very interested in looking at affordable housing. I know we've read in the newspaper, there's several school districts in Metro Phoenix, in fact, that are closing some schools and are interested in doing some repurposing of those schools. And so we're going to be doing this work over the next year or two. And it's just exciting to be able to have this opportunity to take the toolkit out, actually, utilizing these proof of concepts and making them a reality. Many of the school districts we worked with in the pilot study are very close to be able to start developing their affordable housing and attainable housing on their property. So this is a great opportunity, and more to come later. Thank you.
Darlene, thanks so much, and congratulations. Really excited to see all the great work that will come about because of that grant. Maricopa Association of Governments just recently received a $500,000 grant from the JPMorgan Chase Foundation. Very thankful for that. We'll be using that grant to provide technical assistance that's really customized for local and tribal governments through 4 main activities. One, we are in the process right now of developing an inventory of the capacity building needs that local and tribal governments face when developing and preserving affordable housing. Then we'll be issuing a competitive solicitation for a request for proposals. Nonprofits can also submit a proposal to provide that technical assistance to local and tribal governments. It can be for-profit, but please keep your eyes open. If you're interested in either receiving or giving technical assistance, please put your name and your email address in the chat. I'd love to connect with you. The third step then is that matchmaking. It's a provision of that technical assistance. And then the fourth and final step then is to be able to highlight all of the great lessons learned, the tools developed as a result of that provision of technical assistance. So again, if you'd like to get involved, please do let me know. This is a 2-year grant. We just received it in December. So we are in the process right now in that first step. If we can go to the next slide, please, Tyler. And we do want to thank all of you for coming to today's webinar. So the first QR code that you'll see, that's a post-event survey. You can also access it by the link. We'll be sending out this information right after this event. And then the second QR code is for where to go to the Vitalyst Health Foundation. I also put the link in the chat. Please do visit that. We'll be uploading the recording of this webinar as well as the presentations, and you can see all the great information that's been developed throughout the rest of this series. So with that, are there any final questions or comments that anyone would like to offer before we close? Well, all of you have been wonderful. Thank you very, very much for your time. Particularly, thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you for sharing your information, your perspective, your expertise with us. And thank you also to the 156 people who attended today. It was really exciting to see such a great turnout, and we look forward to working with you and continuing this dialogue into the future. This does conclude our webinar today. Again, thank you everyone for coming. It was a pleasure to see everyone and to spend this time with you. Looking forward to the journey ahead.